Urbanization and industrialization brought sweeping changes to Western nations. People looking for solutions to the problems created by these developments began to demand reforms. They wanted to improve conditions for workers and the poor. Many people also began to call for political reforms. They demanded that ordinary people be given a greater voice in government. As we saw in previous lessons, Britain became a constitutional monarchy in the late 1600s. Under this system of government, the monarch serves as the head of state, but Parliament holds the real power. The British Parliament consists of a House of Lords and a House of Commons. Members of the House of Lords either inherit their seats or are appointed. Members of the House of Commons are elected by the British people. In the early 1800s, the British government was not a true democracy. Only about 6% of the population had the right to elect the members of the House of Commons. Voting was limited to men who owned a substantial amount of land. Women could not vote at all. As a result, the upper classes ran the government. During the 1800s, however, democracy gradually expanded in Great Britain. The ideas of liberalism that were popular in France and other countries spread among Britain's growing middle and working classes. These groups demanded a greater share of the power held by the aristocratic landowners. Yet unlike the French, the British achieved reforms without the bitter bloodshed of revolution. The first group to demand a greater voice in politics was the wealthy middle class of factory owners, bankers, and merchants. Beginning in 1830, protests took place around England in favor of a bill in Parliament that would extend suffrage, or the right to vote. The Revolution of 1830 in France frightened parliamentary leaders. They feared that revolutionary violence would spread to Britain. In response, Parliament passed the Reform Bill of 1832. The Reform Bill of 1832 eased the property requirements so that well-to-do men in the middle class could vote. The Reform Bill also modernized the districts for electing members of Parliament. Many of the old districts were areas owned by aristocrats and actually contained few people. In contrast, cities such as Manchester and Sheffield had no representatives in Parliament. The Reform Bill eliminated the so-called rotten boroughs, or empty districts, and gave the thriving new industrial cities more representation. The Reform Bill was seen as a great success, but it really benefited only the wealthiest members of the middle class. Although the Reform Bill increased the number of British voters, still only about 1 in 5 men were now eligible to vote. The passage of the bill, however, did encourage reformers to push for more political change. Among the workers and other groups who still could not vote, a popular political reform movement arose in the 1830s to press for more rights. It was called the Chartist movement because the group first presented its demands to Parliament on a petition called the People's Charter of 1838. The People's Charter called for suffrage for all men and annual parliamentary elections. It also proposed to reform Parliament in other ways. In Britain at the time, eligible men voted openly by voice. Since their vote was not secret, they could feel pressure to vote in a certain way. Moreover, members of Parliament had to own land and receive no salary, so they needed to be independently wealthy. The Chartists wanted to make Parliament more responsive to the interests of the lower classes. To achieve this, they demanded a secret ballot, an end to the property requirements for serving in Parliament, and pay for members of Parliament. Parliament rejected the Chartist demands. However, their protests convinced many people that workers had sound complaints. Over the years, workers continued to press for political reform, and Parliament eventually responded. It gave the vote to working-class men in 1867 and to male rural workers in 1884. After 1884, therefore, most adult males in Britain had the right to vote. By the early 1900s, all the demands of the Chartists, except for annual elections, became law. The figure who presided over all this historic change was Queen Victoria. Victoria came to the throne in 1837 at the age of 18. She was queen for 64 years, one of the longest reigns in history. During the Victorian Age, the British Empire reached the height of its wealth and power. Victoria was popular with her subjects, and she performed her duties wisely and capably. However, she was forced to accept a new, virtually powerless role for the British monarchy. The kings who preceded Victoria in the 1700s and 1800s had exercised great influence over Parliament. The spread of democracy in the 1800s shifted political power almost completely to Parliament, and especially to the elected House of Commons. Now the government was completely run by the Prime Minister and the Cabinet. Thus, ever since Queen Victoria, British monarchs have been mainly symbolic rulers with no political power. By 1890, several industrial countries had universal male suffrage, or the right of all men to vote. No country, however, allowed women to vote. As more men gained suffrage, more women demanded the same. During the 1800s, women in both Great Britain and the United States worked to gain the right to vote. They also organized reform societies and protested unfair laws and customs. As women became more vocal, however, resistance to their demands grew. Many people, both men and women, thought that women's suffrage was too radical a break with tradition. Some claimed that women lacked the ability to take part in politics. In the United States, women such as Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton organized a campaign for women's rights as early as 1848. They led a convention on the issue of women's rights in Seneca Falls in New York. From the convention, they issued the Declaration of Sentiments, a declaration of women's rights modeled on the Declaration of Independence. In the Declaration, they opened with the statement, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal." The Declaration further went on to state that the history of mankind is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations on the part of man toward woman, having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over her. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has never permitted her to exercise her inalienable right to the elective franchise. He has compelled her to submit to laws in the formation of which she has no voice. In Britain, after decades of peaceful efforts to win the right to vote, some women took more drastic steps. Emmeline Pankhurst formed the Women's Social and Political Union, or WSPU, in 1903. The WSPU became the most militant organization for women's rights. Besides peaceful demonstrations and parades, its members heckled government speakers, cut telegraph wires, and committed arson. Their goal was to draw attention to the cause of women's suffrage. Emmeline Pankhurst, her daughters Christabel and Sylvia, and other WSPU members were arrested and imprisoned many times. When they were jailed, the Pankhursts led hunger strikes to keep their cause in the public eye. British officials force-fed Sylvia and other activists to keep them alive. Most protests and hunger strikes ultimately ended peacefully with no lasting harm done to anyone. But one WSPU member, named Emily Davison, did give her life for the women's movement. As a protest, she threw herself in front of the King's horse at the English Derby in 1913. Her action and the funeral that followed became major news stories and attracted a lot of attention to the cause of women's suffrage. Though the women's suffrage movement commanded wide attention between 1880 and 1914, its successes were gradual. Women did not win the right to vote in national elections in Great Britain and the United States until after World War I. While Great Britain moved peacefully toward a true democracy in the late 1800s, France continued to struggle to make the democratic goals of the French Revolution a reality. In the late 1800s, violence and instability continued to plague the country, even as it struggled to achieve a more democratic form of government. In the aftermath of the Franco-Prussian War, France went through a series of crises. After being released by Prussia, Napoleon III spent his last years in exile in Britain. France's National Assembly met to decide on a new government. Meanwhile, in March 1871, a radical government called the Paris Commune took control of Paris. In May, troops loyal to the National Assembly marched into the city. Parisian workers threw up barricades in the streets and fought the army block by block. After a week of fighting, the army stamped out the communards, as supporters of the Commune were called. About 20,000 Parisians were massacred, and much of the city burned. Not until 1875 could the National Assembly agree on a new government. Eventually, the members voted to set up a republic. In the words of a leading French politician, it was the system of government that divides us least. The Third Republic, as this new system was called, lasted over 60 years. However, France remained bitterly divided. A dozen political parties competed for power. Between 1871 and 1914, France averaged a change of government every 10 months. During the 1880s and 1890s, the unsteady Third Republic was threatened by monarchists, aristocrats, clergy, and army leaders. These groups wanted to return France to a monarchy or to have military rule. A controversy known as the Dreyfus Affair became a battleground for these opposing forces. Widespread feelings of anti-Semitism or prejudice against Jews also played a role in this scandal. In 1894, Captain Alfred Dreyfus, one of the few Jewish officers in the French army, was accused of selling military secrets to Germany. A court found him guilty based on false evidence and sentenced him to life in prison. In a few years, new evidence showed that Dreyfus had been framed by other army officers. Public opinion was sharply divided over the scandal. Many army leaders, nationalists, leaders in the clergy, and anti-Jewish groups refused to let the case be reopened. They feared sudden action would cast doubt on the honor of the army. They used terrible propaganda to discredit Dreyfus and his supporters. For example, the image shown here is from a French newspaper and depicts Dreyfus as a treacherous serpent. Despite intense opposition, Dreyfus's defenders insisted that justice was more important than the army and that he should be freed. In 1898, the writer Émile Zola published an open letter titled J'accuse, or I Accuse, in a popular French newspaper. In the letter, Zola denounced the army for covering up a scandal. Zola was given a year in prison for his views, but his letter gave strength to Dreyfus's cause. Eventually, the French government officially declared his innocence. The Dreyfus case showed the strength of anti-Semitism in France and other parts of Western Europe. However, persecution of Jews was even more severe in Eastern Europe. Russian officials, for example, permitted and even encouraged pogroms, or organized campaigns of violence against Jewish communities. From the late 1880s on, thousands of Jews fled Eastern Europe. Many headed for the United States. For many Jews, the long history of exile and persecution convinced them that they should work for a separate homeland in Palestine. In the 1890s, a movement known as Zionism developed to pursue this goal. Its leader was Theodor Herzl, a writer in Vienna. It took many years, however, before the State of Israel was established, making the dream a reality.